From Music for All and presented by Yamaha, it's Mind the Gap, a practical web series for young and future music educators. Tonight on the program, from the Midwest Clinic, Richard Crain. From UCLA, Travis Cross. From the National Association of Elementary School Principals, Earl Franks. From the University of Illinois, Elizabeth Peterson. Tonight's conversation moderated by Myra Rhoden and Susan Smith. Please welcome Myra Rhoden and Susan Smith.
Good evening and welcome to the 6th episode of Mind the Gap, a webinar series focused on young and new teachers and those student teachers whose experiences have been and potentially will be interrupted by the pandemic. My name is Susan Smith and I'm educational consultant for Music for All and a lecturer of music education at Troy University in Troy, Alabama. I've taught at all levels and areas of music education, and I'm especially interested in dogs are starting their second, fourth years as music educators. Our earlier episodes, I co-hosted with David Starnes, director of bands previously at Western Carolina and now an orchestra director at Kennesaw Mountain in Cobb County. But as we move forward, we'll be using and asking guest moderators to help us moving forward. On tonight, I'll be joined by Dr. Myra Rhoden from Fayetteville, Georgia. Boy, what a start tonight. And she'll be first to introduce herself, and the rest of the panelists will do the same. Myra?
Good evening, and I'm so happy to be here. Thanks to Susan for the invitation. I am Myra Rhoden. I do teach in Fayetteville, Georgia. I am the band director and fine arts coordinator, fine arts chairperson, department chairperson at Fayette County High School, which is a suburb of Atlanta. And I too have taught middle school and high school throughout my career, and I'm very happy to be here.
Fantastic. Travis, Dr. Cross?
Sure. Hello. It's great to see all of my friends tonight, and I wish I could see everybody. My name is Travis Cross. I'm the wind ensemble conductor and I'm currently serving as department chair of the music department at UCLA. This is my 8th year at UCLA, just starting. Previously, I taught for 5 years at Virginia Tech, and before graduate school, I taught for 4 years at Edina High School in Edina, Minnesota, a suburb of the Twin Cities. And that's my story.
Excellent. Dr. Peterson.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Susan and Myra and Music for All for inviting me to this and for hosting this wonderful event. And I know that you've done others and will be doing more, so I think it's a really great thing. My name is Dr. Peterson. I am starting my 6th year as Associate Director of Bands at University of Illinois. Before that, I taught for 17 years at Ithaca College in upstate New York. And then before that, I had 10 years of public school teaching experience. And for those of you who are new teachers out there, my first job, maybe like yours, was teaching 4th through 12th grade instrumental music. And I was in a small town in Ohio.
Fantastic. We look forward to hearing from you. Dr. Franks.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm Earl Franks, currently in my 4th year as Executive Director of the National Association of Elementary School Principals, NAESP. Prior to coming to NAESP, I was Executive Director of the Council for Leaders in Alabama Schools, CLAS, an umbrella school administrator organization for 9 years. Prior to that, I was a pre-K-12 principal for 9 years. And then before that, an instrumental music teacher for 13 years, teaching grades 5 through 12.
Thank you. We look forward to your perspective. Now, it might take us all night long for Richard Crain to tell us what he's done. But last but not least, Mr. Richard Crain from the great state of Texas. Oh, I think we got you muted, Richard.
First of all, it's a great honor to be on this distinguished panel with everybody. It's an honor to be here, and especially if we can provide any kind of assistance and help and hope for some young people just going into the profession. I have the privilege of serving as president of the Midwest Clinic Board of Directors. It's a great, great honor. I had that position since 2010. Before that, I was high school and middle school band director for 26 years, and then 18 years I spent as a music supervisor over all the music programs and some other fine arts areas in the Spring School District suburb of Houston. And this is my 64th year in music education, and I'm going to keep at it until I get it right, Susan.
I used to tease Richard whenever he said our people. I didn't know if he talked about just the teachers in Houston or all of Texas. I think that he kind of claims them all. So we appreciate your leadership and and your time being here. We've started each one of these by asking our panelists for maybe some thoughts on what they wish that they had known as a young teacher, or the lessons that they learned later on, that if someone had told them about our specific topic might be of help to them. And of course, this evening we're going to be talking a little bit about professionalism and ethics, because it really is in a transitional state as we're all dealing with the pandemic, and how we be a professional in these situations. So we'll go ahead and get started again with Dr. Cross, if you want to get us started here.
Sure. I guess if there's one thing I wish I knew, it's that letting something go doesn't mean you don't care. Not everything is equally important. Now, we tell our students we want them to be good at everything. We get good at what we're doing because we have attention to detail, because we care about the details, because we care about everything, because we don't just ignore the percussion, because everything counts. But not everything in our jobs is equally worth our physical, mental, and especially our emotional time and energy. And I wish that I had learned sooner that there were some things that I could just shut the computer and go home, and did not have to have power over my happiness if I wasn't going to be able to fix them.
That's just fantastic. Thank you. I do want to say before we move on, we are going to be taking some questions in the chat this evening. So feel free, please, during either the Q&A or the chat area, we'll try to address them as we go along and use them to pivot topics. But also at the end, if you have any questions, we'll be answering them as we go along. Beth, what can you share with us?
Sure, I'm going to be that person who shares a couple quotations with everybody tonight. And this is a little bit timely, but this is from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she said, quote, "If you want to be a true professional, you will do something outside yourself, something to repair tears in your community, something to make life a little better for people less fortunate than you. That's what I think a meaningful life is, living not for oneself, but for one's community." And I think the most wonderful thing is that we all get to do that through music. We get to change communities, we get to change lives through music. So it's just such a joyous and wonderful thing. And even in times of COVID, and we'll talk about that more, I think, a little bit later, we are able to do that, to change lives through music. I will go on to say that there are sort of two other things that I believe are really important about being a young professional. One is that the knowledge of your subject matter matters a lot. So your musicianship is really important. And there are a lot of things that we have to deal with as teachers, but being a great musician and practicing and sharing that passion for music making with your students is really important. Play for them, sing for them, play music for them. Be a music geek, be a band nerd for your students. They need that and will appreciate that. And then the other thing that you've probably all heard, and I know all my young first-year teachers, student teachers tell me, the most important thing is the relationships you establish with other human beings. Getting along with others, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and knowing that there are two sides to every story. I think that's really key to your success as a young professional.
Fantastic. Dr. Franks?
First, students watch everything. How you dress, how you act, what you say, how and what you eat, what time you arrive, what time you leave, how you conduct yourself in and out of class. They are watching everything. And secondly, being liked by your students is overrated. Being respected is the most important trait. The like part will automatically come with respect in time.
I would just add, they watch everything but your ictus.
Yeah, that's right.
Boy, that was a little deja vu. I sounded like I was hearing a little Johnny Long there, Earl, your teacher who was just recently passed away. So I know he'd be proud to hear from you tonight. Richard Crain, what can you share with us?
I would like to wish I had taken Pandemic 101 when I was in college. That would have helped a lot. Mine story is a little bit different, Susan, as you know. I started my teaching career in 1956, and things were different then. And I wish that I had been taught more about the importance, and I agree with what everyone else has said and second what they have made, the points they've made. But I wish I had seen the importance and worked more, which I had to learn after I graduated from college, about the very basic thing, the importance of pedagogy. and the importance, especially the clarinet in the ensemble as a band director, because I was a trombone player. And I wish I had had more training in that. And my first job, I took over in the middle of the year for a band director who was very well loved, and he was killed in an auto accident. So I was a 22-year-old trying to deal with all the emotional problems with young people, as well as trying to get them together and assemble them in an ensemble and a rehearsal. So I wish that I had had a lot of more preparation for things that were not really anticipated. But my story is a little bit different than others. 1956 was different.
Well, this is certainly a time of things being unanticipated. It's difficult right now in music ed to teach everybody everything because we don't know what's coming down the pike. But I talk about tonight, especially professionalism as from a music educator's perspective. Myra is going to take us through some of those things we're going to talk about now.
So I thought I had taught a long time. I've been teaching for 27 years, but I seem like a baby teacher now to some of our panelists who've been in the business for way longer than that. But I know that I have been amazed over the last 27 years of how electronics has just gone from something that a couple of people use to it being just completely mainstream and being allowed in classrooms and things like that. But with that comes social media and social media use. And so now, it's a main way for people to communicate. Sometimes a primary way for people to communicate with colleagues and friends and things like that. So my question for you, now that it's such mainstream and it's a huge way for people to communicate, especially the young teachers who grew up with social media and with telephones in their hands, they want their voices heard, and social media is a way to do that. So what can you tell our young teachers as far as being professional and staying ethical when it comes to the use of social media, whether it's a small tweet or long paragraphs that we sometimes see on our social media feeds? Dr. Peterson, can we start with you on this one?
Sure. I believe very much that words matter. And as Mr. Frank said a little bit ago, they're watching you. They see everything you do, and they will try to find you on social media. I believe, and I tell my students, do not friend your students on any of those platforms. When you go out into the professional world, clean up your social media, your Facebook page, and take out anything you don't want anyone to see. And I mean anything, like if you're at a party, I don't think that should be on your Facebook page. If you can't clean that up, then change your Facebook name. I know there are ways to do that. I know that administrators, and perhaps Mr. Frank can address this, but administrators will try to find you, or colleagues on an interview panel will try to find you and see what you're like behind the scenes. And so I think you want to be really careful that all of that is cleaned up. But I also just don't friend your students ever. I don't think there's any need for that. There's so many other ways to communicate with them professionally, with GroupMe or with email even, which I know seems like an old-fashioned way to communicate to some of you, but I think be careful with the social media.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with Beth wholeheartedly, and I can name instances where some folks teachers have gotten in trouble for taking all sorts of rants on social media. It doesn't do them, and it will catch up with them, unfortunately. Just wish everybody a happy birthday and let it go at that.
Do you believe that there is a way for young teachers to express themselves and their opinions, but still be professional on social media, knowing that interview panelists may be watching, notice that there may not be a privacy setting that they thought was set, and so their students find them or their parents find them? Is there a way that they can still use it and still be professional?
Myra, I think you hit on the key word here, be professional. Social media will get you in trouble, especially as already been talked about, friending your students. You have to remember, you're not a student any longer. And although the students you have may not be a lot of difference in age perspective, but you're not a kid any longer. So avoid being friends with them. I know it's tempting, but you have to separate yourself. But always be professional and know you're representing when you post things on social media. Sometimes people perceive that as you're representing the school, you're representing your music program, you're representing the school district. So you have to be extremely careful.
So Myra, unsurprisingly, I have some thoughts about this. So the first thought is I'm glad that social media wasn't around when I was a new teacher, when I was in college and sort of up and coming, because I know I would have made really bad mistakes that may have ended my career before it started. And I realize that I teach in a certain environment now that affords me a different level of freedom than a lot of people have. But I think the key is, the word that I wrote down is, I think the key is appropriateness. And by appropriate, I don't mean right or wrong. I mean appropriate to the place, the people, and the occasion. And I hope always humane and kind. So there may be certain platforms where you are not associated with your school. You might not even be associated with your name, that allows you to have a presence in a way that it doesn't when it says so-and-so teaches it so-and-so, and it's much more connected. Sometimes we sacrifice a little bit of our freedom and autonomy for professional gain. Sometimes we just don't say things that we have every right to say, or that we're entitled to say, because doing that will put us in a position to be less effective or less successful, and that's life. I think if you have a problem with that, just check out and don't participate in social media at all. There are times when we don't go as far as we could because we know we have other responsibilities. And the final thing I'd add about this is that appropriate does not mean invisible. Appropriate does not mean apathetic. Appropriate does not mean unfunny. Appropriate does not mean disengaged from the world in which you live and the communities to which you belong. If your profession requires you to hide your authenticity, you may be in the wrong profession, or you may be in the wrong place. If welcoming a child is really important to you and you want to represent that in your life, some people will say that is automatically unprofessional. Other people will say that's who you are, that's something to be celebrated. If you're in a relationship that might be a little less traditional in your community, you might want to think about, what am I willing to sacrifice? What am I not willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to, what's important to me? Yesterday was my arrival day. I'm adopted. Yesterday was the 43rd anniversary of when I came to the United States. I have increasingly become more vocal. Chuseok, the Korean Thanksgiving, is coming up on the 30th of September. We're in the Jewish high holidays. I've become increasingly emboldened in sharing those things because I think it's important for the world to know. I think it's important for my students to know that this is part of my life. I'm not posting pictures with a red Solo cup dancing on a table in a bar. And I'm much more forward than most people on social media. So even I have a line. There's a lot of political stuff on there right now. But I think the key to everyone is figuring out that appropriateness question. What is appropriate to this place, this relationship, and this time? And always, well, I say always, except I make an exception for Hollywood celebrities and politicians, always kind, always kind.
Myra, I also have seen many teachers use social media in terms of notification, publicizing, promoting their program. I think it could be a valuable asset in that area.
Absolutely. I think, one thing that people forget is that, we don't want people hiding behind the computer. So, are these things that you would say in person, or are you just typing them out because no one can be in your face literally about what you're saying? So yes, absolutely, appropriateness is number one. So now that many people I will say are online for their teaching, this isn't really social media, but things like Zoom and being on, Microsoft Teams or whatever it is you are for class, and appropriateness for that. Do you have any tips, maybe on backgrounds or eating or anything for the young teachers as they're teaching and drinking, as they're teaching on Zoom right now?
Travis, that looked like a red Solo cup almost. I was wondering if, what that was, but I'll go ahead and start with that. We were all talking about our backgrounds in our various rooms right now, and it does matter. You've got to make sure not only that your background is appropriate, I think that's a great word, Travis, but that you look put together, that your hair is combed, that maybe you're not. I think is cooking breakfast behind the meeting. But that you're focused and paying attention. And I know that's hard. I know we all get Zoom fatigue. The other thing I'll share is that be careful if you are presenting on Zoom and sharing your screen, that what you share on your screen is also appropriate and so you're just aware of what's on your screen.
There really needs to be a feature that says, are you sure you want to share your screen? And then you click yes, and it says, really, are you really sure? I've only done it once, where I thought I was sharing one screen and I shared my whole desktop, and I had like a text window open, and it was horrifying. I am aware that there's a little bit of reflection in my glasses. So if I'm reading my email while I'm attending a meeting, I try to angle my glasses so no one can tell that I'm not paying attention. The other thing that I do think is important also is back to this point about authenticity. I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world if your cat comes into the picture, or if as part of being on screen, someone realizes that you're an actual human being. Our students have one of the things that is most concerning for me about our students is they don't all have living situations that they're proud of. And asking them to be on screens sometimes puts them in a difficult situation. I have a policy in my syllabi where I say, I really feed off the energy of being able to see you, and I can read in your body language if I'm being successful or not. So I appreciate being able to see you, but if you feel uncomfortable for any reason, you can turn it off and I will not give you a hard time about it. And so I think, obviously I want to be wearing clothes. I want to not be, no one ever wants to see me eat, and I should not, have a can of beer or something. But if in some way my humanity is revealed, I don't think that's the end of the world. As long as, again, it's appropriate.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts on that?
I agree with what's been said. Just know that the light, when the green light's on, the camera's on. So you have to be extremely careful. And, for me, it's about the appearance. And I know I'm in the DC area, and many times my colleagues will say, how many times can you wear sweatpants before you have to change? So I think, if you feel good, you look good, then you'll feel better about your presentation. So I think there needs to be some consideration given to that.
Myra, one thing that I wanted to kind of bring up was that I feel like vernacular and language vocabulary that we necessarily use in college or with our friends isn't always appropriate. There are things that become trendy that are acceptable that really aren't a professional situation. Like, students that say that they are trash or things are trash, or to be, excuse the word, but butt hurt. I mean, those are not appropriate things to be saying in the classroom, yet we see people or hear people use those. And I think that it's just really important for us to kind of think about, we said we wanted to connect with the students, but they don't necessarily have to be our best buds and use vocabulary like them. That's one of the ways that we can elevate ourselves to be professionals, is by using vocabulary that's appropriate. And I think that's a difficult transition. Travis?
So can I just add something about vocabulary? And I'm going to sound like I'm the Pinko from the People's Republic of California here. Normally I put pronouns on my name on Zoom when I can. I think that when you don't have the personal touch, that's not the right word, but you don't have the personal connection, And when you can't go up to that student afterwards and say, I'm sorry, I might have said something. Everything is amplified. I think it's really important to learn how to pronounce your students' names and pronounce them the way they want them to be pronounced. Even if it's in a language it isn't the language you speak, to be respectful of pronouns. I'm working so hard, and it's so difficult for me. I'm trying not to say you guys. I'm really trying to. I'm starting to say you all a lot. Mr. Crain would be proud. I'm trying to non-gender because again, when you're in person, it's easier to fix it. If you make someone feel bad, but they feel so exposed by being on the screen and so vulnerable. You think that it's safe because you're not in the same room, but it's actually more vulnerable. And I'm trying, and not always successful, but I'm trying to be very, very mindful of the language that you're talking about, there to be uplifting and empowering and validating of students.
Absolutely. And we do have a question in the chat that's along the lines of what we're talking about. The person says, you said students watch everything. Do you have any tips on remaining professional when technology is failing? My supervising teacher and I are constantly struggling with Zoom and Wi-Fi during our synchronous online classes. Any ideas to help?
Words matter. You can always choose a different word, so it's like, if with your partner or your spouse, you get upset. We all get upset, but there's different ways that you can phrase it, you can state it. And I know it gets frustrating. Here in my office in the DC area, we're, 28 weeks, we've been working virtually, me and my staff, and things happen. But again, I think you just have to step back and try to not allow your temper to get the best of you, and because things are going to happen and they're watching, and it's a good teaching time to teach your students.
I have a story, I think this maybe pertains, of a first-year teacher friend of mine who in his first year of teaching was teaching a sectional and swore, and it was a pretty bad swear word. And he was horrified and embarrassed and apologized to the students right away and immediately went to the administration and said, I am so sorry, this is what I did. I shouldn't have done it. It was wrong. And he just got ahead of it by admitting it and being human, as Travis said. So if the question about the asynchronous or synchronous learning in technology isn't working, maybe there are other things you sort of have as a backup plan for when that happens, and you can type it in the chat, or you can say, okay, go do this other thing, or go practice that scale, or whatever it might be that you're doing. So when you come back together, you can be more focused again.
I would add to that test. Especially if you're doing something new for the first time, if you're trying to write on a score on your iPad, or you're trying to play a video. I mean, call a friend, call a colleague, say, can you come on with the Zoom call with me and make sure that I know how to do this technology. I think, and that's also true in the classroom. You got a new LCD projector, you got a new, there used to be the joke that, like, the longer you've been teaching, the worse you are at the overhead projector or whatever. You got to make sure you know how to do it before you do it. The other thing I would say is if you expect grace from others, you must extend grace to others. So I think if you're always getting hard on students for having problems with their technology, and then it happens to you, that's not going to be as good a situation as if you have been understanding and compassionate when they've had issues. You're as Alan McMurray would say, you're putting deposits in the bank for that time when you're going to need to take a big withdrawal when everything stops working.
Awesome.
Yeah, and students are always watching to see how you respond to things when they happen as well. So if you get upset, super upset, if the technology isn't working, of course your students are going to do the same thing. So remaining calm is always number one. Yeah, Susan?
Yeah, awesome. Well, and to kind of pivot on that a little bit, we want to talk a little bit about what administrators really do think about these music teachers and what we can do in terms of professionalism. We have several people with us this evening who've been in that opportunity as administrators. And Earl, as you dealt with music teachers and yourself as a former music teacher, just in terms of professionalism, what do you want from your music program, or what do you think teachers or administrators want from their music programs in terms of professionalism? Oh, we got you muted there, Earl.
Thank you.
Okay.
I didn't even say a bad word. All good school administrators, they want every program in the school to excel and be great. They want every student to be successful. They don't want constant complaints from parents and the school board about problems dealing with everything we're discussing tonight, this lack of professionalism, not being organized, inconsistent with discipline. Punctuality, especially if you have supervision duties, that's a big liability issue. So as I'm speaking tonight, I hear the different backgrounds coming out from those at higher ed. I have my principal hat on, and so you just got to be at the right place at the right time doing what you're supposed to be doing. And it's critically important, time management, separating yourself from the students not being a student, because many of these students are going to be very close to the age that you are as a first-year teacher. And, being friends, it's a problem. I've seen it many times with younger teachers, especially with the different sexes, male, female. It's a problem. So you just have to be professional at all times. And again, put yourself in the right positions.
I agree with Earl. Be a part of the solution and not part of the problem, and do not surprise your administrators. They don't like surprises. So good communication and be sure that they know what's going on. I agree with Earl.
My husband's first job, he was the high school band director when he was 18 years old because he graduated college early. And that's the reason he grew his mustache, because he was about the same age as his seniors, or just a little bit older. So we kind of forget that those ages are so close, but it's so far away. So and again, this is open to anybody, but those new teacher pitfalls as far as professionalism and you're scared to be out there that first time, and who do you ask for help from, and maybe your band director or choir director had some liability or some opportunities that they could say things that you as a new teacher you can't, to either administrator or parents in a rehearsal situation. So we'll just kind of go around and if there's some new teacher pitfalls that maybe we can avoid, and some suggestions on that. Anybody want to jump in first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I've already talked about there's not a lot of difference in the age. The way you dress is important. Don't dress necessarily like you did when you were in college. You're a professional now. I hope you have a dress code in your school. Conduct yourself, again, like a professional. Don't be one of the kids. We've already talked about social media. You need to find a mentor, certainly as a music teacher, but a fellow teacher that's a mentor. And you have to be careful who you confide in. When you go in the teacher's lounge, sometimes there'll be some teachers in there that we call cave dwellers, those that are consistently against virtually everything. And they'll try to get you on their side. And they're always negative, Debbie Downer, everything's so bad. So be careful who you align yourself with, find a good mentor. And it always, I think, to be there to support the school. You want the school to look good.
Mr. Crain, do you have some words for us on that, or?
Well, I taught many years ago, but in my observations, especially for young teachers going into the classroom, and this may never happen, and I don't know the personalities of who these youngsters are, but don't ever get into an argument in front of the class that you're outnumbered immediately, even if it's one student. He's got 30 or 40 allies there. So you have to not let yourself get drawn into that. And as far as physical stature, I've known a lot of 4 foot tall teachers who had outstanding command of their classes. So it's just how you do that, but observe others. I just think that it's really important that you observe master teachers all you can and see how they handle situations, but don't let yourself get drawn into anything in front of a class. You have to deal with those outside of the class. And I have some other suggestions later on.
All right, well, don't let us lose those, Richard Crain. So make sure that we get back to them for sure. Especially in these times, you know, even the administrators above us are sometimes having to enact policy that they don't always agree with. And we as well have to kind of toe the company line a lot of times. And it's difficult to not get involved in those kinds of conversations. For our administrators and all our professors, you know, what does that mean to you? And how can you do that and remain professional without kind of losing some of yourself as a teacher and as a person? Earl, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, this is something that I'm really sensitive about, because I've seen the perspective as a music teacher as well as a school principal. And I've seen too many music teachers that fall into this, not supporting the company line. You must support all aspects of the school. You should want your students to be successful in every subject, club, and activity. I'll give an example. If your football team is in the playoff, don't go around saying, I hope we lose, because I don't want to do another halftime show. That's not good for the school. That's not good for the students. And so as a professional, you shouldn't want that. You should want everything in your school to be great. Occasionally attend athletic and other after-school evening activities. Volunteer, offer to help. You must support your colleagues in their programs. It's very, very important if you want to be successful.
It's easy to sometimes get caught into that teacher at the water fountain kind of thing in the teacher's lounge. How can we avoid those types of things? Travis, Beth, do you have some words of wisdom?
Go ahead, Beth.
I would just say, I mean, I think it comes a little bit from the fact that we've all spent 4 or 5 years maybe as a music major around other people who love music as much as we do, who, you know, you develop this philosophy and you're taught that that's it. That, like, I have to go give this philosophy to everybody in my music program and at all costs. And I think that goes back to my earlier statement of building relationships. Like, you have to hold on to what's true to yourself, but you have to realize that every other subject, hopefully the other teachers in school are just as passionate about those subjects as you are about music. So yeah, you have to hold on to that. You have to maybe teach people about how important it is. Because I think sometimes we feel like, well, we're the first thing to get cut and our schedule is always changing and we have all these problems. But try to look at it positively and solve those problems with those good relationships you built at the water fountain or in the cafeteria, because you're being positive and helpful to others and working well with other people.
You know, I had said initially that, you know, not everything is equally important or equally worth your time. And when the school district comes and says, we're going to cut 5th grade band, that might be an appropriate time to mobilize your parents. But if the principal says you have to have the band stay for the 4th quarter, they're not, you can only go there once, you know, and so I think, you know, being a team player doesn't mean accepting everything without question. And it doesn't mean not trying to make things better, but you gotta be smart, and you have to, again, realize that some things really matter, and you're gonna need to find allies and have difficult conversations. But if you're the person who always does that, when the real important one comes, you're not gonna be listened to. I think one thing that is helpful with students and with parents is to not, I don't think it's our job necessarily to parrot the talking points from our principal or our superintendent or whatever. But I don't think it's a good idea for us to be fomenting a revolution. And I think one way a technique to get out of that would be a parent comes up to you after a concert and says, can you believe that they're they're not moving the homecoming dance, and now the band students have to miss the jazz concert or something, I would ask questions. I would say, well, what do you think would be a solution to that? Why do you think they might have done that with students? That's a great one. Why do you think? What are some reasons why that policy might exist? And so you're not patronizing them. You're not, saying your opinion doesn't matter, I'm only going to toe the line. But you're also not, whipping up a frenzy that will get you in trouble. And it is, I think, part of our job as teachers to help students understand how to say something and how to see complexity, how to realize that maybe the first thing that comes through, okay, it was snowing and they're not going to let us go to the jazz band competition. Well, okay, so what might be the policy that led to that? What might go wrong if we were to try to go anyway? You know what? So to just treat them like they're thoughtful people, but they're just not thoughtful people who make good decisions all the time yet, and try to help them figure out how that decision was reached by someone who has a real heavy responsibility.
So that kind of gets us to our next topic is, how do we ask those types of questions in an emotionally charged time like right now? We have a lot of questions as teachers to ask administrators. I told one of my daughters recently, I don't know that I've ever been in a principal's office that I didn't cry. I mean, even if I wasn't in trouble, I thought that I was always in trouble. And I think it goes back from having a bad first principal who threw me in with parents too early by myself. But, how do we ask those questions without coming across as weak or also belligerent? Earl is, again, as a former administrator, you and Richard, if you want to talk a little bit about that, how best can we approach questions and not seem like we're being divisive?
Well, I think don't be afraid to ask your mentor. I've already talked about it's important to have a mentor, and certainly in your profession, but also another colleague in the building, a fellow teacher, maybe a seasoned teacher, a veteran teacher. But don't be afraid to have a conversation with your principal, especially in private. I think it's very appropriate to go in, sit down, have a conversation one-on-one with your principal to try to get a better understanding of that. But again, it goes back to just keep in mind that if you want someone to help you, you have to be willing to be a team player from the very beginning. And so all of that comes together. But in terms of asking questions, absolutely. Go and sit down and have a conversation with your principal.
Yeah, I agree. And you have to be the eye in the calm of the storm too. You just have to discipline yourself, especially. And I've seen so many experienced teachers, really going through an emotional time, the most probably stressful in their careers right now. And but I agree with Earl. And you have to communication again. And but you have to be the eye in the storm of the storm, because they're all watching you, as we've pointed out, and you have to show that maturity.
Yeah, I would piggyback on what both Earl and Richard said, and especially when you're in with your principal or you're in with a trusted mentor. I think it's worth knowing that everybody likes being a mentor. You get a real endorphin rush from helping someone. Everybody likes being a mentor. They like being helpful. They like being a resource. It's a sort of, not to be Machiavellian, manipulative, but it's a really great way to flatter someone, is to ask them to help you. I try when I would talk to my principal. I got better at it over my years. When I talk to a dean or a provost or something, I try to ask questions and ask advice rather than complain about a situation. So I wrote this down as after you ask the question, what I would start with a principal is, here's what I want for the students. Not here's what I want for me, not here's what I want for my program, not here's what, as a graduate of the University of so-and-so, I demand that my situation be. This is what I want, this is the experience I want the students to be able to have. Here are the barriers that are preventing us from doing that, whether they're policy or circumstance or other teachers. Here are the barriers. how might I solve this problem? What advice do you have for me? And is there any way that you can help me? And then stop talking and let them mentor. I think rather than going and, oh, this isn't going to work, so-and-so is a problem, and, just complaining, and then the principal is sitting there like, well, what do you want me to do? I think rather to frame it as, this is what I want for the students. And then what ideas do you have? And whenever someone comes to me and asks that, I think real hard about it. And I try to, well, maybe you could try this. Or what about this? Have you tried this? And then you're armed with a whole arsenal of techniques and things that you can do to try to make it better. And you've done it by having that person be your mentor and your guide, as opposed to your adversary, as opposed to the person you're trying to get something from. They're the person who's helping you.
This is the greatest mentoring profession. The problem is that we're afraid to ask because of some stature that, imagine, those folks are ready to answer your questions. So don't be afraid to ask anyone.
I'm going to add one more thing about the principal or your administrator. In my very first few years of teaching, I always invited that person to come watch rehearsals. So before I even had to go in their office and ask for something, we had a relationship, and I wasn't afraid of whether they were going to tenure me or not, or tell me I wasn't doing a good job. I asked, like, what can I do better? What do you see about my teaching, my classroom management? So that we had this relationship, and they were already my mentor, whether they wanted to be or not. I was going to ask them to do that. The other thing I want to just make sure you all heard that Travis said is students' first language. Like when you go to that principal and you ask, what I want to do this for the students, or this is the problem, and you might have some solutions, that means a lot to that administrator, because they want the students to be successful too. And then finally, because this was sort of about COVID, I know my own students are struggling a lot right now. So those of you who are in this group might be, if you're feeling like you're at home and you're struggling through COVID, I think what's going to happen at the end of this is people are going to be so excited to play music again together in person that it's going to be wonderful, and it's going to be okay, and we're going to get through this. I've never taught through a pandemic before either, but I really do hope that you have hope, and we just have to keep being hopeful about the other side. It's going to happen.
I want to tag on to Dr. Peterson, because I had that written down too. Whatever decisions you make, keep the welfare of your students paramount. That's who you're working for, and make sure that their welfare is paramount.
I want to piggyback real quick on something Mr. Crain said a few minutes ago, which is, don't wait for it to be done before you ask for help on it. We're always afraid, especially young teachers with insecurities, that if so-and-so legendary teacher who teaches across town knows how bad I am, they're going to think less of me. No, the only time people think less of you is when you don't ask for help, when you're bad and stay bad. We're all learning. 4 years is not enough to learn how to do this, but for the regular contact with other people who do it, your peers and your heroes, we don't get better. There's always a pressure to make sure it's concert ready before you let other people hear it. Well, by the time it's concert ready, you don't need any help. You bring the people in to help when it isn't ready yet, and they can help you, and they can show you what you're not doing. They can give you advice. The fear, the only thing that comes from trying to look good among people who you respect and hide what you don't know, is that you won't learn anything else.
So we have a question that's come from one of the viewers that's along the same lines of communication. And so we've talked about how to communicate with those who maybe are supervisors, but our teachers are also going to be in the roles of making decisions. And everybody is not going to agree with the decisions you make. So the question is, as a beginning teacher, what techniques would you suggest to communicate with parents that don't agree with the decision that you make and still remain professional while doing that? Any takers?
I can tell you everything I did wrong. I mean, one of the real challenges is when you are a new teacher and you are near the age of the students, And the thing that just got me crazy was, well, you'll understand when you have kids. You know, it triggered me. But what I wanted to say, well, you'll understand when you have a bachelor's degree in music. That would not have been productive. But I think the key is to explain the policy. If you're not sure, get backup from your administrators first. Go to the principal or the department chair or someone first, and talk through it with them first. But then to explain and then listen. And it may simply be, I'm sorry, that's not the way our program is set up, or I'm sorry, the syllabus says this. The amount of energy I wasted trying to craft the perfect email with the perfect explanation that would explain to that parent why their student was actually better off as first chair in the second band than 12th chair in the top. The number, well, this is why we all do marching band in the fall. This is, you know, the time that I spent trying to convince people who are not in a position to be convinced by a rational argument was wasted energy. And I think if I would have just said, if I would have made sure that the policy was sound, that it was supported by the administration, and then said, this is what our policy is, I'm sorry, and then, you know, not feel like I have to convince them. I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, just like as a teacher, it's important to understand sometimes why your administrators, or there is a why for the administrators to make certain decisions. You know, sometimes your parents just need to understand why you make those decisions too. So many times they just may want to vent to you. And even if you have a meeting, just let them talk. And at the end of it, you know, once you've explained yourself, or not explained yourself, but explained the why behind whatever policy it is, everything is fine. They just want it to be heard.
And Myra, I think it's important to communicate. We've talked about that. Be organized. You have a plan. And that parent needs to know that you care about their kid. Many times they'll overlook things if they know you care. And finally, the principal can be your best friend in dealing with difficult parents, especially younger teachers. So don't be afraid to reach out to your school principal.
So if we can pivot just a little bit, of course, we just have a few minutes left. We're here in the pandemic, and band as we know it is just not the same, any and everywhere. And so you have some people who may be meeting with smaller groups than they're used to, with different instrumentation. You have some people who are just meeting online. So 2 questions for this one. One, how do the young teachers keep motivated? You know, what are some things to be motivated as a teacher? And then what are some suggestions that you may have to keep your students motivated, especially those who join band for the social aspect that they may not be able to get while they're online?
You know, I'll start with just something I'm noticing in my own teaching at the college level during COVID. And we have a bunch of students who are in virtual ensembles and some who are in-person chamber ensembles. But I'm finding that I'm giving my students a lot more choice and a lot more agency in how we're doing things and what we're doing. And that's new to me. And I know that's something that we all should be doing anyway, but it seems easier in COVID. So and I think the students really appreciate that. So whether that's the social thing that you're doing on Zoom, or you're coaching a chamber group, and what are you hearing and how are you hearing it, and who is the melody and what would you do to make that recording better? I think being able to ask all those questions and have them participate more readily than they might in a traditional band rehearsal is a really exciting part of COVID for me.
I was talking to an experienced director yesterday, and he said that he was using this as a positive experience, and he thought that he would be a better teacher actually after this is over. And this is unprecedented in the history of this country, probably, as far as its effect on education. I can find no other catastrophe, crisis that's affected education like this. But it will be over. It will be over, and we have to believe that, and we have to be prepared for it. And I think it's really unfortunate that young teachers are going into this environment, but count on experienced teachers, how they prepared for a crisis in the past and have faith in themselves, for one thing.
Well, and to piggyback on what Mr. Crain just said, people who are student teaching now, your student teaching is going to last about 3 or 4 years now. You didn't have the experience where you got to be in person the same way that everyone before you was. So you're going to have to, after you get your degree in hand, you're going to have to continue to seek out learning. It was the great Paul Hack from Kansas and the University of Minnesota who used to say to us, congratulations, you're a licensed teacher. How does it feel to know that the state has found you to be minimally competent and likely to do no serious harm? And the reason he asked that question was to frame, so now what are you going to do? The licensure, the certification doesn't mean you're done. It just means you're starting. The other thing I'd throw in, I know Earl wants to talk to. The other thing I would say is to define your objectives. I don't want to sound like I stepped out of a Madeline Hunter lesson plan from 1985, but define your objectives and teach to your objectives. What we can't do in the pandemic is duplicate the activities. So if all you were teaching were the activities, you're out of luck. But if the objectives were, my students will learn to love music, my students will develop characteristic tone, my students will learn to listen and match. If those are what the objectives are, then you can still teach to those. If your objective is win contest or get a 1 at state, well, sorry, not possible. But if your objectives are those other things, you've got a fighting chance.
Bravo, Travis, bravo.
Yeah, Travis, I had that written down. Attainable goals, objectives, being organized, prepared. But let me say this to you young teachers. You're more prepared in dealing with the way we're teaching now than 30-year veterans. You're very tech savvy. And I can only imagine someone's been in the classroom 35 years and they're having to get used to all these new technologies that did not exist. And I'm not talking about Richard Crain, certainly when they were younger, and that includes me. So just know that people are looking for something positive during these difficult times. Promote positivity, avoid being negative about the situation. I assure you there are enough people who are taking care of that. Do the very best to help your students.
That's awesome. We have a quick question here in the chat. I might throw it to Travis since he's kind of our fashion consultant here, but would you suggest teachers dress business professional or business casual if the dress code of the school is not explicitly stated for staff? I think I know what your answer is going to be about, dressing to the nines, but go for it. Tell us what you think.
The most important thing is match your mask to your shoes. I think band directors are a little different because we have something called marching band and band camp and outdoors, and nobody wears a suit to band camp. There was one day that the air conditioning went out in our building, and it was going to be out the next day. And I actually went to my principal and I said, listen, it's 90 degrees in the band room. Everyone is going like this for an hour. So it gets 5 degrees warmer by the end of the rehearsal. These kids have seen me wearing shorts. Is it okay if I wear? I said, fine, it's fine. But I think if you're looking for a rule, it's better to dress 1 degree too professional than to dress 1 degree not professional enough. And I think the older you get and the larger you get and the more, for instance, I have always asked my students to call me Dr. Cross. Because I think that's an important boundary. I feel like I look a little young, and I do wear jeans when I teach at the university, but that allows me to keep a boundary so they know that I'm not, and I engage with them on social media, so they know that I'm not their friend, I'm their teacher. The Dr. Cross helps. Both places I've taught college, the marching band director has been someone who's been 30 years older than I am, who is physically of great stature and has intimidation built in on their own. They've both gone by their first name. They don't need it to keep that boundary because their physicality provides the boundary for them. So I think if I had a rule of thumb, it would be 1 step. And this is also true for the Midwest Clinic. Remember, Mr. Crain, when the Midwest Clinic brochure used to say professional dress for the Midwest Clinic? I would much rather have someone wear a suit at the Midwest than to wear jeans and a t-shirt. And if especially if that someone is me. If I'm going to make a mistake, I'd rather make it too formal.
I bet Richard Crain wore a suit to band camp.
I'm sorry?
I said, I bet you wore a suit to band camp.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
He's wearing a tie right now. Look
I
at
know.
Hey,
Cool in Texas in August, you know, it's not hot at all there.
don't go down to downtown Houston, though. It's underwater.
Yeah, that's what I'm.
Can I just say a couple of things?
Yes, sir.
And I'm sorry. Never stop learning about your craft. Persevere. And remember, others go to work. You go to music.
I think he dropped the mic on that with all the rest of us. Thank you, Richard Crain. Well, unfortunately, we're getting to the end here. We got to kind of wrap things up. We have one other question about first-year student, about being pitcher in the baseball team and live performances. Again, I think that maybe our friends would agree that you have to have that relationship with the principal and the athletic director, and you've just got to come to decision and be ahead of the game as opposed to it being it happening right at that moment. You've got to schedule around things.
And protect the student.
Yeah.
Protect the student. When there are conflicts, the decisions need to be made by the adults, and never send a student into a situation where they're the one who has to negotiate between two people in a position of authority over them.
Yeah, get to know your coaches. And that way, when that happens, you can just go and have a conversation with the coach and figure it out yourself. Exactly what Travis said. Yeah.
Yeah, I've found that it's usually the inflexibility of adults. Children are, amenable, and we see plenty of opportunities where people have played football and been in the band or been a music major. It just depends on the adults and how they can get together and the leadership. So speaking of leadership, thank you all so much for being here this evening. I'm sorry to kind of cut it short, but we are going to have to move on. Music for All's mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through Music for All. Our vision is to be a catalyst to ensure that every child across America has access and opportunity to participate in active music making in his or her scholastic environment. I want to thank Richard Crain, Travis Cross, Earl Franks, Beth Peterson, and Myra Rhoden for being with us this evening. I'd like to thank our nationally presenting sponsor, the Yamaha Corporation of America. Be sure to check out the Yamaha Educator Suite at yamahaeducatorsuite.com. Before we say goodnight, it's important that you understand that now more than ever, these uncertain times continue to impact Music for All, and we're extremely grateful for any donations gifted to our nonprofit organization. If you've enjoyed tonight's program, and in order for us to continue to provide our free educational resources and advocacy materials, please consider gifting to Music for All in any amount. Your gift allows us to serve our mission with future educational programming such as this webinar. Please visit us at musicforall.org/give. And finally, join us in 2 weeks for our next episode of Mind the Gap on Tuesday, October 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern and 6 Central for more on music instruction at the high school. And we're planning to be joined by Tim Alshouse, Greg Brim, Amanda Drinkwater, Jarrell Horton, Charlotte Royal, and moderated by David Starnes and Dean Westman. For Music for All, I'm not Myra Rhoden. I'm Susan Smith. You're supposed to say that.
And I'm Myra Rhoden.
Thank you. Thank you, and good night, everybody. Thanks for being with us.